Week 0 of college football is in the books. College football is back, and we had quite the entertaining week of games. We're going to take a look at all 5 games and talk about what happened and look at some of the surprises of week 0. We'll start with the big one of the day, Iowa State, Kansas State over in Ireland, and this one was sloppy to begin with. Overall, though, I feel like it didn't disappoint. It was college football to a T. We saw a number of different exciting things, and it was fun. I don't think a lot of people anticipated that Iowa State would do some of the things that it did, but you look at what this team was able to do. They come away with a big win, first of all. That speaks to this team's resiliency, but there were definitely some things that they still need to sort out. This is going to be a challenge to win the Big 12, but getting a huge win over Kansas State is a great way to start your season. 24-21, Iowa State comes away with the win, and this was a team that for the most part played pretty well. I really liked what John Hancock was doing in terms of play calling. I think there were some concerns later in the game that he's going to have to address, but this was a team on defense that was playing really well. The linebackers who last year struggled with health were healthy, and they were playing all over the field. They were playing pretty much wherever you needed them to be. That's where they were. They were having a tremendous game, and this was a defense that was swarming Kansas State. Now, Haycock did a really good job of sending unique pressures and mixing things up so that Avery Johnson and that Kansas State offense weren't able to get comfortable, weren't able to figure out what they were doing, and they already run that unique scheme. So throwing in these unique pressures were not helping at all. But again, those linebackers were flying around the field. And you do have to also tip your cap to the secondary. They were very physical in run support. They were very good when they needed them to be. And part of that had to do with, the defensive line and the linebackers were fitting their gaps. They were getting the run fits, and then it was up to the secondary to make plays, and they were doing that. Now, the secondary had a couple of lapses that you're going to have to address. The double move to Jace Brown, and then the big play to Jerrin Brown. You're probably going to have to fix if you're Iowa State going forward. Yes, you lost quite a bit of talent in that secondary, but you do have certain players that were able to play at a certain level. And honestly, with how physical they were, you know that they're capable of defending the run. It's just that you're going to face some really good passing attacks, some really good wide receivers. And Jace Brown is one of those receivers that was going to give you problems. And the play early in the game was good, and then later in the game it was kind of a struggle. And when you're locked in on man-to-man matchups, you're going to have to find ways to make plays and not get beat by double moves, which they did. So that's going to be something to keep an eye on. But overall, this was a defense that was extremely physical. They were taking it to Kansas State, taking it to their offensive line, and creating a ton of havoc for a team that a lot of people picked to win the Big 12. And I think that part of it was the predictability early on for both sides. This was a game that was extremely sloppy. It was a very wet surface. It was raining for the first part of the game, and it was kind of predictable what teams were trying to do, what both teams were trying to do. And completing passes was kind of not on the agenda. And part of that is when these two quarterbacks, and Rocco Becht and Avery Johnson, were throwing passes, you kind of had to throw it right in your wide receiver's frame. Otherwise, anything outside of the frame, even later in the game, was pretty much a guaranteed incompletion. You were struggling to move the ball through the air, and defenses were keying in on that, especially Iowa State's. Now, one thing that was interesting on the offensive side of the ball is that early in the game, it was the Carson Hansen show. You were seeing his physicality, and at 225 pounds, how could you not? You needed the ability to put points on the board, to move the ball, and you were going to do that by running it. And Carson Hansen was huge at the beginning. You kind of saw him fade away, though. They didn't really utilize him as much. They went to Abu Sama, which we knew they were going to use 2 running backs, but we didn't see Carson Hansen a ton until the second half. You saw that the effects of his physicality late in the game, and that really helped them when they needed him most. That's going to be really exciting for them down the throughout the rest of the schedule, throughout the rest of the season, because you have a guy who can be physical. You also have a good complement with Sama that can help him when he needs it. And his play, especially on that fourth down with, it's 4th and 3, game's on the line. You get the first down, the game is essentially over. The pass to get to him just, again, opens things up for this offense, which this is an offense that overall I think you feel some optimism, but there's also some things that you need to worry about a little bit. So honestly, it's just the running backs did what they needed to do, and you came away with a win. It wasn't the greatest win by any means, but starting out with a win is definitely a better way than where if you're on Kansas State side. Now, Rocco Beck's mobility did come into play as well. This is a team that I think was struggling to find some chemistry through the air, and you brought in certain guys like Chase Howell, Xavier Townsend, pretty much non-existent throughout the game. That's a tough thing to stomach, and we kind of knew that there were going to be some struggles when you lose two NFL receivers. You knew that there's going to be a little bit of a step back, but I don't think a lot of people thought that this was going to be as much of a struggle, and it was. No offense to Eskildsen, but he's probably not who you would have picked to have such a big game. Granted, he stepped up big. He had 2 big catches for this team when they needed him, and that was a big part of their success. I really like, though, one, this team's resiliency, the defensive physicality that led to the resiliency, but also the play calling. John Haycock deserves a ton of credit, but when his defense was struggling, it was actually Taylor Mauser that stepped up and was really dialed in with his play calling. I really like what he gave Rocco Beck. They allowed him to be part of the run game, but also use his mobility to get him out in space. At times, Kansas State was giving Iowa State's offensive line a lot of trouble, and one way they combated that was just rolling back out, maybe not having him on a full rollout, but a half rollout, and letting him see the field a little bit better. The play calling on that 4th and 3 gives Beck 2 options for that 4th down call, and Beck goes with obviously the right choice to get the first down. I love the chemistry those two have, the trust that they have in each other to make the right decision, and it helps having a quarterback like Rocco Beck for sure. But that was really nice, and Mauser deserves a ton of credit for his second half play calling and his decisions, and whether they kept Carson Hansen on the sideline for a reason or not, if it was injury, I don't know. What I do know is that putting him in when they did, when Kansas State was reeling, Iowa State's offensive line was being very physical, and they were dominating the line of scrimmage, that to me was a part that really did Kansas State in. I think that's where we really saw Iowa State take over, and then the 4th and 3 call was just the perfect way to do it. You send your wide receiver in motion, there's one guy out to the left, and the motion puts a defensive lineman responsible for Carson Hansen. And I like that matchup for Iowa State 10 times out of 10. Hansen's a little bit quicker than the defensive lineman. It was clear that there was plenty of room for him to run, and you get the first down. He nearly gets in the end zone, which ultimately ends up being good that he doesn't, because they're able to run out the clock. So overall, Iowa State is very satisfied with where they're at. They're very satisfied with the result, and it's a result that I think a lot of people did not see coming. I mean, I know that I thought Kansas State was going to win. I knew I had questions about Iowa State, but they found a way to win. Now, I do still have questions about that Iowa State team, and one of the questions that I still have is the wide receiver position. That's going to be something they have to sort out, but sometimes you just got to find a way to win. Now, on the Kansas State side of things, this was a team that struggled on 4th down. They went for it 4 times. They only got 1 of them. They averaged 6.7 yards per play. So you're looking at a team that yards per play, it was 6.7 to 4.2. And you wonder, how did you lose this game? Well, 2 of your biggest plays were your touchdowns to Bradley and Brown, but otherwise, you had a lot of struggles overall. You had a lot of things that didn't go your way, and you had a lot of mental mistakes. 6 penalties to Iowa State's 1. Now, I could hear fans maybe arguing, oh, that shouldn't be that big of a disparity. That's maybe fair, but at the same time, you got to find a way to win. You got to find a way to be better, and you have to find a way to limit those mental mistakes. First game of the year is obviously going to be a little bit of a challenge, but at the same time, Iowa State's also in their first game of the year. So disappointing loss for sure. And the disappointment kind of started right away. Dylan Edwards tries to field a punt that maybe he probably shouldn't have fielded, or if he did, should have fair caught it. And he fumbles it. Iowa State picks it up. Granted, it doesn't hurt them because they get the fumble right after that. They recover and get the ball back. But then Dylan Edwards is out for the game. Hurts his ankle. We don't see him again. And that was really disappointing because that's a guy who I was really excited to watch in this game. But they move on. And honestly, Joe Jackson, I think, as long as he can take care of the football, hang on to the ball, he's going to be a solid piece for them. He appeared to be a very good runner for them. Just obviously the turnovers didn't really help. The defensive line is going to get a lot of credit because they were dominant early. And Toby Osunsami was incredible. That's a guy who I think is going to rise up in draft boards and going to have a phenomenal season. I really like what he was able to do. 4 tackles, 2 tackles for loss, 2 sacks. He is someone that's going to be a problem for Kansas State's opponents. And this is a Kansas State team that was looking for answers up front. The linebackers played their part, but the defensive line, especially early in the game, Kansas State did not have to send pressure. They did not have to send any extra rushers. They were content just sending 4 or 3, and they were getting home to Rocco Beck. They were creating a ton of havoc without sending extra pressure. They did not have to blitz as much, and that opened things up for their defense. Now, Iowa State was able to exploit some of their weaknesses, the secondary being one of them, and that's really where they got hurt the most. And at the end, I think maybe this is a team that is trying to identify some depth, because at the end of the game, they looked gassed. Iowa State was dominated the line of scrimmage. They were being very physical, and it didn't seem like Kansas State had an answer. Matt Wells, I think, did a pretty good job of play calling. He put Avery Johnson in some good positions to make plays, and I think overall, I feel decent about Avery Johnson as a passer. Now, is he great? No, not by any means. And, the 2 touchdown passes, the big plays he made, there were, you can make an argument that the Jace Brown one was underthrown, and it was tough to see some of those things, but also I'm not going to put a ton of stock into a game where the field is wet. You can barely see the lines. It was a chaotic game. It's just one game. We'll see how it goes, but his play throughout the future is going to determine how successful this team is this year. The mental mistakes, though, like I said, were a big thing. The turnovers killed them. The penalties killed them. They just had penalties at the wrong time, and you just can make an argument about any certain play that didn't go their way, but those are things that they could have controlled, they could have fixed, and they didn't. The offense, I think, could be really explosive. You saw the big plays to Jerron Bradley and Jace Brown. Jace Brown's obviously absolute stud, but that was, I think, the big thing that I came away with is that Matt Wells, I really like what he was doing. They did a lot of off-balance looks. They were trying to get Iowa State out of position, and it was fun to watch them. I think it's going to be an interesting season, even with this loss, and obviously they can still make it to the Big 12 championship. They just have certain things that need to get sorted out before you can truly feel confident about that. Next game of the day was Idaho State at UNLV. Dan Mullen's first game with the Rebels, and this was one that just did not look good. And part of me knew this was going to take some time with the amount of talent that they brought in. You brought in a ton of talent from the transfer portal. You had 2 new quarterbacks running the show. Everybody was going to have to get kind of acclimated with each other. But the defense struggled. They gave up 7.2 yards per play to Idaho State. And this is an Idaho State team that was bringing in a new quarterback. Jordan Cook was pretty good, minus the 3 interceptions. And then you had a rushing attack. Brooks ran for 132 yards, averaged 7.3 yards per carry. The turnovers are really the difference. If you don't throw 3 interceptions, I think Idaho State maybe wins this game. Now, UNLV is thankful that Jaden Thomas is back. 10 carries for 147 yards and 3 touchdowns. He was the reason that they were able to stay in this game and make a comeback, honestly, because it was not looking good. The quarterback play, again, wasn't great, but at the same time, you just got to find a way. It wasn't pretty, and maybe Idaho State is going to be better this year. Maybe it's a step back for UNLV with this transition, but it was just not a great look, but you get a win. A win kind of just is a win at this point, and you're just happy that you're 1-0 instead of 0-1. That's just kind of the biggest takeaway from that game. Very sloppy, very full of things that you need to fix. Plain and simple. There's really not much to it other than that. The Kansas Jayhawks probably looked arguably the best of any team that played this weekend. I think that they played an inferior opponent, which probably helped, but everything that went into this weekend. You had the new stadium, you played a group of 5 team, you had Jalen Daniels coming back. There are a lot of things that went into this game that could have made this special, and I think they all went their way. Throwing in the Kansas State loses probably makes things a little bit sweeter, but overall, I think Kansas was very focused on what they do. A 31-7 win over Fresno State. This was a game that it felt not like dominant, but Fresno State definitely wasn't going to be in the game. Yeah, it was 14-7 after the first quarter, but this is a game that wasn't close by any means. And the score doesn't really feel like it was that indicative of how the game actually went. Now, Jalen Daniels looks great. Jim Zabrowski was dialing up great plays. And a lot of the plays that he was calling were just getting his guys open and making things super easy for Jalen Daniels to make throws and make plays. And they were using a ton of shifts, a ton of motions, and that was getting Fresno State out of position. It was opening up a lot of easy throws. They leaked a lot of, tight ends in the flats, and maybe even getting running backs involved. Rushing attack was also pretty good, but this was a Kansas team that offensively didn't have a ton of concerns outside of one. Jalen Daniels took a ton of hits, and this is against a team that they pretty much took control of the game and did whatever they wanted for the most part. Fresno State, though, had opportunities to lay some big shots on Jalen Daniels, and that's not going to be sustainable. That's not going to be something you want to see. So Zabrowski definitely has a lot of work to do in that regard. Now, in terms of Fresno State, it did not go how you wanted. You knew that the Matt Entz era might take a little bit of time before it got on its feet, but this is obviously a tough way to start your season. It's not the ideal way, but playing a Kansas team that was extremely talented, that was better than you, wasn't going to be easy. You did have some nice things, though. I will say that EJ Warner, while he did struggle overall, 18 of 29 for 179 yards and 2 interceptions, he made some nice throws. I think there were some good decisions, and he definitely threaded the needle on some of the tougher throws, but also had the 2 interceptions. He had the fumble as well. Not a great day for him, but there were some things that if you're looking for optimism, that's one of them. He did make some nice throws. He did have some things that went his way, but overall, not much that went in favor of Fresno State. They're clearly outmatched. The defense really just got out schemed for the most part. I think they did have some nice plays, but the defense definitely was not as sound as they could be. And Kansas really just had them running around on basic concepts. They weren't running any crazy plays, but they were just getting gashed on in the run game. They were getting gashed on simple 1 to 3 yard routes. Those were things that are going to be challenging to win football games long term, but Fresno State has just a ton to fix and a ton to work towards, but this is a team that still could be really exciting. I trust what Matt Entz has done in the past, and I think that he's still going to be a fun coach to pay attention to when it's all said and done. Sam Houston and Western Kentucky. This was a game that was much better than I originally thought it was going to be. Now, Western Kentucky still wins by 17 points, but there were points in the game where you felt like maybe that was a closer game than expected. Now, we'll start on the Sam Houston side. Hunter Watson is going to be really fun in Phil Longo's system. He had 209 yards through the air, no touchdowns, 1 interception. He also ran for 91 yards. and 1 touchdown. He's a tough player. I think he's going to be really good in that system. He was fun to watch, and he's just got to find some wide receiver help. The rushing attack appears to be solid. Alton McCaskill is back. If you remember him from Houston, transferred to Arizona State, transferred to Colorado, or he might have gone to Colorado and then Arizona State or before that. 52-yard touchdown at the beginning of the second half. Not much else really, but that was nice to see. I think that he definitely has the talent to be really fun, especially in that conference. I think that he is a physical runner who has underrated quickness that can make some big plays for this Bearcats team. But they did not have an answer for Maverick McIvor, and this is something we need to discuss. Tyson Helton does not get enough credit for the work that he's done. He does not get the credit for the ability to identify talent in coordinators, in quarterbacks, because this is a dangerous combination. And Maverick McIvor was 33 of 51 for 401 yards and 3 touchdowns. Now, if you want to compare that to other transfer quarterbacks that have come into Western Kentucky under Tyson Helton's watch, you look at Austin Reed, 58% in his first game completion percentage, 336 yards and 2 touchdowns. Much better than that, obviously. Now, wasn't as close to Bailey Zappi, 80% completion percentage, 424 yards and 7 touchdowns. But this speaks to Tyson Helton and his ability to identify good talent. Same thing with Matthew Henry. Matthew Henry is going to be a special player for this team, and as if Western Kentucky hasn't had enough in their lineage of good wide receivers, Matthew Henry could be super special. 7 catches for 148 yards and 1 touchdown, averaged 21.1 yards per catch. That first touchdown catch they had was absolutely insane, and he's going to be fun. He's going to be a problem for Conference USA, and this is going to be a really fun team. Now, one thing I will say is that the defense was hurt by explosive plays. Yes, they were opportunistic. They made some turnovers at key moments, but Sam Houston just didn't have the weapons to consistently hurt them. Now, granted, you're probably not going to face a ton of teams that have that. So in this conference, you're going to make a run because you're not going to face a ton of teams that can exploit your weaknesses on a consistent basis. Teams like Liberty are probably the only ones that you're going to have to worry about, but it's also the first game. So let's not dive too much into the overreactions. Let's not worry too much about what is going to be wrong with this team, because overall, it's still going to be a good team. And this offense has the potential to put up a ton of points. Scored the most points in week 0. Granted, there are only 5 games, but this is a team that has a lot of potential in Conference USA, and Maverick McIvor looks good. He looked extremely confident. Most of the decisions he made, whether they were the right ones or the wrong ones, he wasn't second guessing. He was making that decision, and he was making that throw regardless. Now, some of the decisions he made were not great. Some of the decisions that he made were in dangerous situations where you could have seen an interception, but Sam Houston either dropped it or just was a little bit short. But there was not a lack of confidence. He knew where he wanted to go with the football, and he took his opportunities. He made sure that I'm going to make decisions, and I'm not going to second guess myself based on what I see. He was going to make those choices. He was going to make those decisions, and he did without any hesitation. And Western Kentucky is in good hands because of that. Again, 41-24 for Western Kentucky. When you look at the yards per play, 5.9 for Western Kentucky to 6.3 for Sam Houston. Again, Sam Houston kind of benefited off of those big explosive plays. Overall, though, this is a team that wasn't able to get a ton done. And Western Kentucky's defense, while they were opportunistic, they were playing with a ton of energy. They were flying around the field. They were making some big hits. So they're playing with a ton of confidence. They do have the ability to make some big plays. It's just you got to find ways to be more consistent, because teams with more talent, I should say, more weapons, are going to make life a little bit more difficult for you in the long run. And then the final game of the night was Hawaii and Stanford. Stanford traveled to Hawaii. It's the first game of the Frank Reich era. We saw Andrew Luck on the sidelines. We saw him in the coach's booth, which was really interesting. He seemed like he was really getting into it. Just very different situation for Stanford. And for a while, it looked like Stanford was just going to be the more physical team and handle this one. And then chaos kind of took over. When you look at things for Hawaii, disastrous start. Just a terrible way to start things. You know, you're down 3-0, and then Stanford kicks off, and your kick returner decides to call a fair catch on a bouncy ball and catches the ball at the 1. The next play, Micah Alejado takes a snap, tries to escape pressure, fumbles. Stanford picks it up in the end zone, 10-0. That was not the start that you needed, and it was not a good way to have your quarterback, who is starting his first full season, get off to a terrible start and start the game. It was not the way you wanted things to go. And honestly, at times, it did not look good. It was not looking good. It looked like Stanford was the bigger and more physical team. And you thought that maybe it wasn't going to be a good game for this Hawaii team. And Alejado also was dealing with an injury. He had a big scare when he got his leg caught underneath him, or the defender was tackling him, did, the infamous hip drop tackle, which is not legal in the NFL, but that's not a thing in college football. But obviously it affected him. You could see that he was limping. Some of the passes that he made, it was clear that his plant leg was not letting him do what he wanted. And it also affected some plays that could have broken this game open, because once Hawaii settled down offensively, they made some plays that could have been really explosive. It's just that Alejado missed on 3 deep balls, and they weren't by much, but you could definitely tell that the accuracy wasn't there because he just didn't have the legs in him, because he couldn't put the right amount of torque on his lower body to get that power to be a little bit more accurate. And that's something to keep an eye on. The deep ball has to be better, because Hawaii has the receivers to break off big plays and to get off to a good start, and also to be able to stretch the field vertically. They have a number of guys that can make big plays like that. And if your quarterback can't hit them, that's going to limit what your offense can do. And for a while, it just looked like Alejado in this offense, we're just going to take hitches. We're going to take 3 to 5 yards, and a lot of times that's fine, but you got to find ways to be more explosive if you're going to be able to take that step and truly be that team that you're capable of being. And he's going to play a big role in that. And he was fun to watch. Just honestly grind through the injury, just work through the adversity, and just find a way to win. It was so much fun to watch, and he's going to be a fun player. We talked about this in the offseason. Mike Alejado has the potential to be special. This team has the potential to be special. Now, beating a team like Stanford by 3 points, is that the greatest win of all time? No, absolutely not. And I know it's only one game, but this could be a special team. And winning a game like this, even if it's against a team like this in Stanford, this is stuff that you can build around, and you're building confidence right now, because Hawaii has not had a ton of success for a couple years now. And Timmy Chang is trying to build something special. This is a way to do it. Beating a power 4 team is a great way to get that started. Now, you do have to redirect your attention, because you face Arizona this next week, but this is a team that could be really fun. And the offense is part of that, but maybe a bigger reason for their success, for their win, was the defense. This defense was flying around. Stanford was having a ton of problems trying to block them. And it wasn't just they were getting to the quarterback during passing plays. They were being physical in the rushing game, and they were being physical in every single facet of this game. And Dennis Thurman deserves a ton of credit for his game plan. He had a ton of unique pressures dialed up, and he got his guys ready for this game. The energy level was there, the excitement was there, and when it came down to it, they made plays when they needed to. And especially the turnover with about 5 minutes left in the game. We'll talk about this from the Stanford perspective. I have no idea what they were doing, and especially with what they had just done on the previous drive, throwing the ball in there made no sense. But Hawaii's not going to apologize for that. Hawaii is going to be like, hey, we'll take this ball. You want to give us a chance to tie this game up and then later go win it? By all means, we'll take that. The interception was a great play, and it's going to give your offense a chance to move the ball down the field. Idaho takes it down. They kick the field goal to tie. And I think that when you're looking at what Stanford could have done better, there are a number of things. The first thing I'll point out is that when you watch this game, Stanford was easily the bigger team. Now, that doesn't automatically mean better, but Stanford was the bigger team. It looked like they were more physical, and at times at least, and they just didn't, I don't know why, they just didn't dial into that. And the commentators made a note of, Andrew Luck made a comment saying, like, we need to get back to running the football. And they do, because this is a team that didn't have a rushing or receiving touchdown by their running back last year. And they broke that streak with Micah Ford's performance. Now, why they didn't get to Micah Ford more, I don't know. 26 carries for 113 yards and 1 touchdown. The drive that put them ahead 20-17, they were running the football with no issues. Hawaii did not have an answer for them, and they just basically bullied their way into a touchdown. Then they're up to 20-17. They're trying to seal the game. They made a couple of plays, and then they dial up a pass play, and Gulbranson throws it. Granted, it's a great play by Hawaii, but he throws it right to Hawaii, gives them the ball back, and it didn't work out. They just didn't do. I don't know why. You're trying to steal the game. You're trying to kill clock. I just don't know if you're trying to change your identity back to what it once was. You got to run the football. I don't know. You got to run the ball. You got to give it to your guys that are making plays and not give it to a quarterback that you're not really trusting, honestly. And then when the other thing that was weird was Hawaii has the ball. It's 20-20. They're driving down, and Frank Reich doesn't use any of his 3 timeouts to stop the clock to give his team a chance to potentially score. Like there was time that they could have gotten the ball and went down and scored, but they didn't bother. So I just don't like the situation at Stanford. I feel bad for the kids there because what is this? Like, what are we doing? Frank Reich's going to be there for a year and then that's it. Like, what are we doing to this program? And then you make decisions like that. Like, it just didn't make any sense. The play calling didn't make sense when they needed it to be good, and then they lose a game like this. So if you're a Stanford fan, I'm sorry. I hope that it's better for you, because this used to be a team that was a top 25 team. This was a team that was going to be physical, and they decided to go away from the things that they used to be good at. Running the football is one of them. They also apparently, they still use multiple tight end sets, but Sam Roush only have 3 catches for 6 yards is almost a crime. Like, that's just terrible. I don't understand how you don't get him more involved. And part of it is you have a quarterback that you don't trust. And are you going to have a new quarterback next week? I feel like you have to. Gulbranson's clearly not going to get it done. If you can't beat Hawaii with Gulbranson or with this team, then you're not going to beat really anybody. It's not going to be easy. So if you're a Stanford fan, a very frustrating week for sure, a very disappointing start to your season, but you kind of knew that with how everything is going on. And maybe Andrew Luck has a better vision. Maybe he has a plan. I assume he has a plan. He's a smart guy, but right now it's looking terrible. I don't like this experience. I don't like some of the decisions that were made. And granted, the coaches are also in week 0, but this was just a tough way to go out. If you're Stanford, it was a tough way to lose a game. But if you're Hawaii, you're not going to apologize again. And that's, like I said, this could be a special team. And beating Stanford isn't the way that you just put down your flag and you shout out, hey, we're going to be this elite team. But building confidence by getting wins over Stanford and Arizona are a great way to kind of get your guys in the right mental state, right? You need guys to play with a ton of confidence. And if you're able to beat teams like this, it doesn't matter if they're good teams or not. This is a group that's going to build that confidence. They're going to be excited. And you saw the effects of Timmy Chang. This is a team that's playing with a ton of excitement, a ton of energy. The defense was swarming. The offense was making plays. Granted, it was sloppy at times, but this is a team that has the right energy, they have the right mindset, and a win against a Power 4 opponent is going to build a lot of excitement. Timmy Chang is going to really lean in on that. And that was really fun. That was an exciting time for Hawaii fans, playing in front of your home crowd to start the year, playing against a Power 4 opponent. There really wasn't much else that you could have asked for if you're Hawaii. And now everybody's going to try to look at what is the status of Micah Alejado going forward. Is his leg going to heal? What is his injury? That's going to be a big question, because it was clear that the gap between him and his backup is going to be a drastic enough one where that's going to kill some of your excitement. And again, there are too many receivers on this team. I think that they have 4 receivers, maybe even 5, that are going to be fun. And the rushing attack is something we also need to kind of discuss, because when the passing attack wasn't doing its job and when Alejado was really struggling, they went to the rushing attack, and the rushing attack did its part. They definitely deserve a lot of credit. Cam Barfield, Landon Sims did a great job of running the football when they needed them the most, and that helped them tremendously. So this is a group that has lots of options. Now, do they have an elite option? We don't really know yet. The talent is definitely there, but that's going to be a big question for this team. Who's that alpha that they are going to go to when they need plays? Mike Alejado is going to need guys to get open, and he had that today, and I think he's going to have that throughout the season. Now, is there an alpha that's going to take over and separate himself from the others? I don't necessarily know that, but I do know this is going to be a fun team. The talent is there. The energy is there. Timmy Chang is doing a lot of good work. And if this is a team that's going to give people that nostalgic feeling of from when things were going really well, when Timmy Chang was playing quarterback, when Colt Brennan was here, even you can go back to when Cole McDonald was playing quarterback. Now, granted, that era is not the same as Brennan and Chang's, but that's an era where the offense was humming, the offense was putting up points, and this is a team that had a lot of excitement. We're hoping to get back to that, and this is a team that's going to be really fun to watch. But week 0 is here, it's over, and it's gotten us into the college football season. It's gotten us into the swing of things. The best sport in the world is back, and it came with a lot of excitement. It came with some really ridiculous things, and it's going to be a fun year. I think that this was just the beginning of what could be one of the more entertaining seasons that we've seen, and we're just in week 0. Week 1 is right around the corner. There are a ton of games coming up starting on Thursday. If you're new to the channel, subscribe to the channel as always, and we will see you in the next video.